I learned how to sculpt Blender in about 7 days. Have you ever felt like you couldn't express yourself? That's how I'm feeling when it comes to organic shapes, and I think Blender is the solution to get me there. I've been making 3D objects for a few years now, things like a butterfly coaster or a dog bowl, or someone gave me the blueprints to their house and I made their building as a 3D model they could share when people came over. But nothing organic. I haven't made anything with curves or an animal that looks realistic. So why Blender? Blender has the complexity to make whatever you want. If I'm going to make organic shapes that make sense, that effectively look real, I wanted something that had the bones to do it. And it was free to start with. I've loved seeing the projects that people have made in Blender for years. Some of the creations that these artists sculpt is very impressive. Let's get started. There's a lot of Blender tutorials out there, but I felt CG Boost was the most all-encompassing for the skills I'm trying to learn. So the CG Boost tutorial started off pretty well. You want to block out the shapes and focus on the form of the object. You don't necessarily care about all the textures and things, you're looking on the big picture ideas. A big portion of this was getting all the extremities as singular objects and then using the mirror modifier to correctly orient them. We want our right hand and our left hand to match to a certain degree. One of the things I kept finding when I was doing this is I would get distracted and focus on smaller details like the fingers or the toes. I kept thinking I should get these right because I want to get the big picture here correct so then we can focus on some even minor details in the future. But very quickly did I learn, don't focus on hands till you're ready for hands. It's really hard to switch between the big shapes and then some of the more ornate shapes as the fingers unless you're truly sculpting them together. And since I don't really know the brushes at this point, I had to redo this quite a bit and I wasted a lot of time in the first day or two. I also really noticed how during this process it's very difficult to take everything in from your mentor during the tutorial and put it directly into the work. So there's several times where I'd have to go through, stroke with a brush, see what happened, and realize, wow, one of my settings is messed up and I need to like identify everything inside the video to look back and be like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to keep trying through. My goal is to speed up my learning process by failing from something, learning from it, and then succeeding with it. So the quicker I can get this cycle going, the better it is. And it was around this point that I realized maybe I should switch from intermediate tutorial to beginner tutorial. I do really like the CG Boost mentor, so I figured I would actually buy his course online and go down that path. Even with all my struggling, I still feel kind of proud of this original result. And here's the render of the intermediate tutorial. Kind of proud of it for being my first one. But let's get into something a little bit more focused. Now, I know I'm still learning how to sculpt in Blender, but I noticed my mouse may be slowing me down, and rather than continue to blame the mouse for my own efforts, I decided to go out and get a graphics tablet, or a manual tablet. So the one that I chose, and a lot of people recommend, is any tablet from Wacom. So the one I chose specifically is the Wacom One, and I really like this tablet from what I was going through. And as you'll see, it really speeds up the workflow when you're trying to sculpt these things, when you're using a pen versus a mouse. So let's try it out. One of the first things I noticed differently from this tutorial versus the last one I was doing is we're starting from the icosphere. Now, usually when you start from the baseline icosphere, you'll have enough subdivisions that you don't have to worry about it, but I've really wanted to understand this to a greater degree, so I started with my own icosphere and added some subdivisions myself. And I quickly learned that if you don't have enough subdivisions, it's going to be really hard for you to see any part of the modeling. But if you have too many, you'll make a lot of effort trying to move all the polygons around, and it can make it even harder if your computer starts to slow down and chug on you. Again, I learned that following an expert who's done this 1,000 times is very difficult on your first attempt. So while this might be looking like I did this in a first attempt, I had, I believe, 6 attempts to finish this sculpt and present to you what I had. And it really does take a substantial amount of effort than what I was ever expecting. I will say, brush settings are one of the most important things to get right, and if you're tweaking them and trying to refine them yourself, and you happen to notice that your brush is no longer working the way that you expect it to, as in my case, trying to make the feathers, I could not figure out, and no one could tell me what was wrong with my brush specifically. And ultimately, the decision when you can't figure it out is to restart to the defaults and start over, which could really hurt if you felt like you were honing in a brush for a specific tool set, but it's going to save you in the long run because you get that repetition of how the brush is supposed to work, especially from what the instructor is telling you, but also you can dial it back in and you'll know what you're changing this time. And with that, I'm really proud of this render. This is the owl is what I'll call it. And I'm really proud of how this guy came out. And while this is the render, wait till you see this next part. There you have it. 7 days of learning Blender for sculpting is in the books. If you enjoyed this and want to see either more 3D printing or more sculpting, please subscribe to this channel. I'm out.